What are Navia's biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you all today, because she is one spunky and powerful mafia boss. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Honestly, my favorite pro when it comes to Navia is how she breaks Geos conventions. Geo characters are usually a few things: def percent scalers, if not split scalers, very slow paced, playing best within mono Geo teams, and usually they are not very good. Navia is none of these things. She's an attack percent scaler with a super bouncy, fast-paced playstyle, an element-based teams enjoyer who is also a very good and up-to-date DPS. Navia takes all the problems of Geo and spins them on their head, being able to take advantage of even the dreaded crystallize reaction. She took that useless thing and turned it into something actually valuable for her own unique playstyle. Not to mention how her kit prefers to play with at least 2 non-Geo units who can supplement elemental application due to her hunger for crystallize shards. There are no other Geo units who benefit from crystallize the way that Navia does. The fact that she's so fast-paced, especially as a claymore which adds to her uniqueness, is so refreshing. Her nukes are very quick fire and take no time at all to pop off, and because her field time is so short, she slots into so many teams very comfortably. Speaking of which, flexibility on a DPS is something that can only be valued if it's good flexibility. I don't care if a unit has 50 really bad teams, I'd rather just 1 to 2 really good teams. Navia somehow manages to achieve both impressively enough. All of her DPS comes out all at once with her 2 skill blasts, and she's able to build up crystal shrapnel even when off field, with your current teammate being able to collect crystallized shards and stack up Navia's nukes. Also, her burst is off-field, allowing for some more crystallized madness with your on-fielder applying elements in order to generate more shards. And her teams are impressively flexible. You can run her standard carry team of herself, a secondary Geo, one of the good Hydros, and Bennett. You can run Noelle Navia combos in which you fill in the core with elemental applicators, which allows Noelle to drive with Geo on-field super comfortably. You can put her in dual carry teams very easily, because she genuinely only requires minimal field time in order to dish out her damage majority. She can literally just be played as an occasional skill nuker to amazing efficiency. Shoot dude, you can even play her in Plunge with Navia, Chiori, Farina, Xian Yun, which is one of her most potent teams as well. Navia's flexible nature allows her to access almost any team you can think of competently. In her own best in slot teams, her DPS is extremely formidable. In Noelle teams, her playstyle is complemented so well, I seriously recommend you try them out, and even if she isn't the best in slot option in her more spontaneous dual carry teams, she is undeniably a pretty darn solid option within them. This level of flexibility means that basically no matter what stage of the game you're at, you will be able to form a competent Navia team. Noelle being free is also a huge plus to this, and thanks to having such an adaptable nature, Navia will easily be able to find places within new teams. Speaking of which, Navia's shelf life value is nothing short of impressive. No matter how many new units come out, Navia will easily be able to slot herself in there because her off-field bursts can sustain crystallize. Even if you can't max out her nukes in every team, the Punch Day pack is still highly formidable. For example, let's think of all the Fontaine units that have came out which can sustain a Navia within their teams. Linny, dual carry Linny, Navia, skill nuke Navia, Farina, Navia's best buffer option to date, Xian Yun, Navia Plunge. Chiori? Despite hating constructless teams, she still manages to be Navia's best Geo teammate. So Navia throughout the Fontaine patches has consistently received solid teams that she can play in, and even if they aren't absolutely best in slot for those individual characters, they are still good enough to warrant being an option. She's been an amazing DPS for the entire Fontaine patch, even while being Geo, defying everybody's expectations, managing to keep up in the meta, even with absolute behemoths like Noivellette, Arlecchino, and Linny hanging out around the place. She's nowhere near the level of those characters, but still clears Abyss in very comfortable timing. Plus, Navia still hasn't received a dedicated Geo buffer that tends to your kit specifically, so there's a chance that she can only get stronger from here, though that pro is a double-edged axe, so keep that in mind as I'll touch on that soon. Frontload is a blissful thing. Units that are front-loaded tend to be very strong, especially if said front-loaded damage is high. Take Linny Vape for example, the front-load of that team is insane. And for the uninitiated, try it yourself. Yet, front-load can still have some flaws. What if it's multi-wave? Then front-load that isn't sustainable via multiple rotations becomes pretty annoying to handle. Well, Navia has no such weaknesses. She has 2 skill nukes available to her, so you're able to partition out her DPS between enemy waves, which is super comfortable in quality of life. Her positioning feels really good, and you can aim her front load, which is very nice. Auto-targeting is for the weak. No shade to auto-target enjoyers, by the way. What I mean by that is that if you need to blast at a certain angle in order to hit all the enemies in front of you, you're able to do so. Frontload itself tends to be the best DPS variant. Not always, as Navia is sustained instead of front-loaded, and he's very, very strong too. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the way they handled front-load on Navia feels super ergonomic and heavy-hitting. Not to mention how easy it feels to stack said nukes with the Geo-infused normal attacks in between her nukes to regain crystallized shards for her next nuclear blast. Miss America over here is really asking to legalize nuclear bombs. Well, if Navia said so. I'm gonna keep this pro really short, but when Geo comes into season, she's gonna be one of the best choices for Imaginarium Theater at that time. This is because of her ability to fit pretty nicely into the nonsense teams, because as long as they can apply their element and help Navia nuke, she'll have access to her main core mechanic. She can bake macarons, and macarons are one of the hardest sweets to bake, even for pro bakers. So this not only makes her a mafia boss, but also a pro baker as well. React down below with a yeah, and a sub if you agree, and join my Discord. We have macarons to share. I love Navia as much as the next Macaron Mafia enjoyer, yet she still unfortunately has some cons to speak of. First of all, aiming Navia's nukes is great and all, but if the enemies are too far apart or far away, they can miss because her nukes don't have a very far range. Navia's skill makes up the main meat of her damage share, so missing even one nuke is a massive hit to your overall DPS. She packs so much damage into these 1 to 2 nukes of hers that knowing enemy grouping strats is really gonna seriously help you when playing Navia, so you can position yourself as effectively as possible. Not to mention how Navia's main DPS teams basically never feature a grouper of any kind. Not even many of her flex slot teams do. So you're basically cooked like a burnt pastry. Ahaha, yeah, I know, I'm hilarious. Most Abyss enemies nowadays do spawn pretty closely to each other, but please do keep this in mind. This is where the main brain usage of Navia gameplay comes into action, in one humble Juice's opinion. On the whole, Navia does tend to struggle more with larger groups of enemies, and she is happiest when dealing with boss chambers or smaller 2-target scenarios, preferably with larger hitbox enemies. Well, that's a juxtaposing timestamp title, isn't it? Anyways, enough nuking of the fourth wall. Navia's Constellations, especially for a modern Fontaine DPS unit, leave a lot to be desired. She feels like a wonderfully complete unit at C0, which is great, but this is a shame for all you Navia simps out there who were looking to beef up your boss to the max. I will say that Navia C6 is good. I'm mostly targeting her C0 to 5, with a particular emphasis on C1 to 2, because that's what I assume you'd probably be getting if you were interested in Navia high investment. Fontaine DPSes all have a track record of having incredible Constellation lineups, namely Farina, Noivellette, and Arlecchino, but even the ones who are less dominant Constellations-wise, such as Xian, Yan, and Chiori, still have really amazing cons. Shoot, Chiori's cons are actually amazing for her teams, and remove so much of her restrictability. There's not much you gain from Navia's high investment, and while her cons aren't as bad as, say, I'll height them C0 to 5, this is another case of every support first, DPS second. Getting Farina's Constellations from C0 to 5 will be a better increase for your entire Navia team over getting Navia's own cons, namely Farina C0 to 3, much like how Alhaitham prefers Nahida C2 over his own C2. Verdict, Navia's weapon is really good for her, but it's not as groundbreaking as Noivi's Fancy Book or Arlecchino's Special Scythe. This can be interpreted as a pro for low spenders, however, as Serpent Spine is really good on Navia, especially at higher refinements. For curious free-to-plays, yes, Verdict is worth getting as an upgrade over the options of Tidal Shadow and the Melazine Sword. So if I were you, assuming quote-unquote you is a dedicated Navia simp, if not, then comment your favorite waifu and husbando down below and I'll rate your taste out of 10. I'll be harsh. Anyways, I would get C0, R1 if interested, and then either stay at C0 or go all in for C6. A Navia C6, while it's very solid, it is one of the more mediocre C6s compared to the likes of C6 Arlecchino or C6 Farina. Now, this is in the con section, but I invite you to treat this con as a neutral statement. This is because Navia is already really powerful at baseline, being a super good unit in the meta even with this being the case. But it is worth pointing out how Navia has no dedicated Geo support. No, this character does not have to be a 5-star. Goro is a 4-star and is easily Ito's best buffer by a landslide. It's not like Hoyo hasn't made supports for only 1 or 2 characters in the past. Faruzan for Shao and Wanderer, Kujo-Sora for Raiden, granted she works with Chlorant Hyper now, but 2 years for a new use case is kind of yikes. Yunjin for Yoimiya and Chlorant, Shenhe for Ayaka and Ganyu. Yet Chiori, Hoyo's perfect candidate for this, was made to anti-synergize with the one constructless, convention-breaking Geo that would have really appreciated a dedicated buffer like that. The concept was sitting right there, ripe on the table for the taking, yet Hoyo refused. How strange. Zhongli and Albedo are solid for Navia, but once again, they have no true synergy with her specific mechanics because they're so unique, and Chiori, even at C0R0 at her absolute worst, is still a better selection than these two, so Navia's in a rough spot when it comes to Geos. Noelle is very comfy indeed, but if you want to play Navia at her strongest, then you want to play her in a dedicated team supporting her damage specifically. And it's kind of cope to pull for a unit with the hopes that one day they get better. Look at Dia. She did get new use cases and isn't nearly as bad as she was on release, but she didn't gain anything groundbreaking. Now, the difference is that Navia is a fantastic unit at base, but as of right now, Navia lacks this dedicated teammate that would really help her own damage thrive. C1R1 Chiori exists, but the key word here is own damage. Her time may eventually come, but don't pull for Navia hoping for her future to be better. Only pull for Navia if you're happy with what she is now. The head of Vespina di Rosula still to this day manages to be the head of the Geo meta by breaking the very definitions of what a Geo DPS unit is supposed to be like. Her kit is a wild fountain of creativity, and Navia herself is super duper cute, so that should be reason enough to indulge. While she isn't a must pull or priority pull by any means, Navia is a strong and satisfying DPS that is both worth your time and will shake up your account with her uniqueness. Navia will surely find a place on your teams one way or another, very strong DPS that will stand the test of time for at least another half year to come in my opinion. Hopefully this video was able to tell you Navia's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out, and which of these do you think Navia would like the most?